and that is us. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Time to Talk Titanic. I am here with four of my beautiful co-hosts. We've got Dean in the top, and to me, left-hand corner. Hello, Dean. How are you?
Hello, I'm great. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me back. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, it's good to have you back, and good to see you. Presley, how are you?
Doing good. Good to be back.
Awesome, brilliant. Thank you for coming. And Sebastian, we'd said in the group chat you weren't feeling too great earlier, but and you're probably feeling even worse now that you've got Louie next to you down there. To me, Louie is right next to you with that horrible little Tom Titanic.
I gotta admit, I am a little bit uncomfortable with Louie in the room, but I think I'll manage.
Yep. To those who are listening and not watching, some deviant of a human created a 3D printed Thomas the Tank / Titanic, and Louie's a bit of a martyr for a background, like a green screen kind of background, and he's put that little Tom Titanic there, and it's staring directly at Sebastian.
Yeah, I feel like it's a stab at me.
I did that for you.
For me.
Two favourite things, Titanic.
It's just because you noticed all
Thomas.
the train books in the background that makes me look educated, which I'm not.
We're about to have our first argument here. This is
lovely.
I did something for you, and I get slated.
Do you know fair? Like, Sebastian is our resident train guy, and Thomas the Tank is a train.
He's a tank.
Yeah.
He lives in that. No, I'm not.
Island of Soda, right?
Yeah.
Thomas has also taken on like this new kind of like meme, like very millennial like life. Like, I see a lot. There's just one of it's him kind of chugging away from the camera or whatever, and at the bottom it says,
It was time for Thomas to leave. He had seen everything.
Yes, and I love it. It's just so true. It's so true. Excellent. And moving swiftly on to Louie, who has now removed Tom Titanic, and we can now see his nice, trendy living room. Louie, how are you doing?
I'm just grateful to be alive and be here with you beautiful people.
That's amazing. We love to hear it.
I'm like Margaret Thatcher, what?
Wow. We're like 2 minutes in and we went there already?
It's purely because I made the political stuff last.
Yeah, well, I have to warn everybody listening or watching that Louie will be dropping some spicy stuff tonight. So you have been warned. Viewer and, viewer discretion is advised.
Don't worry, guys. If you ever get like little cartons of milk, I won't steal them from you. I won't deprive you of that, ability to make your bones stronger and stuff. It's a thing. Margaret Thatcher, she wasn't great. She took milk away from little kids. She ain't cool. People are probably listening going, who's Margaret Thatcher? You don't really need to know. Watch The Iron Lady, though, the film with Meryl Streep. She won an Oscar. The Iron Lady is a very good film. Watch that. Super swiftly on.
You made it sound like she was like an evil Santa Claus, like climbing in children's bedroom windows, stealing the milk while they slept.
She was. Although, to be fair, she did help invent soft scoop ice cream, which is really random.
Yes.
That's like the only thing she ever did.
Fascinating. I know. Weird. So, yeah. There you go. That should become like a new thing. Like one random non-Titanic related bit of trivia. Margaret Thatcher helped invent soft scoop ice cream. There you go. Show over. Let's go home. We cannot top this.
Cheers, guys. See you later.
See you later, guys.
And the sinking of Titanic increased the sales of lettuce.
Really?
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. I would totally have believed that.
There would be someone who believe it. That would be the new conspiracy. But today...
What if I just started one?
Yeah, that's how they get started.
Yeah, that's how they get started. Loose lips sink ships, and loose lips also start conspiracies. But today... Today, before, it's really funny, I would have had to cut that pause out, but now I don't have to, because people can see that I just gave you a hard stare. And people will enjoy seeing that hard stare. But anyway.
The hard stare.
Stop. Today's episode is all about the most kind of terrifying, I guess, the most miraculous, the most I say amazing, but I don't mean like positive amazing. I mean, I guess for someone surviving, it's pretty amazing, like in a good way. But like,
incredible,
just the most, incredible, like captivating, memorable kind of accounts of survivors that made it off the ship. And I mean, obviously there are some that made it into lifeboats, and I won't say too many because potentially, because I don't know what my co-hosts are going to say. And I think I alluded to one of the passengers I'm going to mention before we recorded. But there are people that got into lifeboats and their stories are equally as incredible. But I think, for me, it's the people that potentially maybe didn't get on a lifeboat in the traditional sense. But to be fair, more people got onto lifeboats than actually no, more people didn't get onto lifeboats. But their stories are equally as valid and equally as interesting. Like Arthur Puchin's one that comes to mind. Like his story has made it into films as like a standout. So, but we're going to speak about the survivor accounts that we think are the most compelling and memorable. And as well as that, we are also going to speak about what we think we would have done if we had been on the ship. And that can be as in-depth as we want, or it can be as simple as, I probably would have been poor, think I'd have died. So, but we shall see. We shall get into it. And yeah, I'm excited to start. So would anyone like to start us off with the passenger or passengers that they think, this is what I think of when I think wow, how on earth did they make it off that ship? How did they make it out of the water? How did they get onto the Carpathia? What the hell? There was something divine intervention going on there. Who would like to kick it off for us, or shall I?
I think you should start.
Okay.
Purely because I don't know who you alluded to at the start. So I think I missed that bit, so I don't want to say the same person as you.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I'll kick things off. So, forgive me for the pronunciation because it's not a common name anymore. It's not a name you really come across. I want to say Rhoda, Rhoda.
Rhoda.
Yeah, Rhoda. I worked with Rhoda, and that's how she spelled it. So yeah, Rhoda.
Yeah. So Rhoda Mary Rosa Abbott. And when we say Rosa, I put inverted commas for those that can't see. She was referred to as Rosa Abbott for a long, long time. But her name was actually Rhoda. And the reason for that, they believe, it's one of those things that it can be proven, but it can actually be proven, we'll never really know with Titanic. But when she boarded the ship, she gave her name, and the man who wrote the names down obviously heard it as Rosa, but she had actually said Rhoda. So maybe even in 1912, Rhoda wasn't a super common name, and he was like, oh, Rosa, cool, awesome, great, here's your key. But she boarded the ship as a steerage passenger with her two sons. She had actually traveled to England on the Olympic in 1911, which is interesting because I think that's one thing I hadn't really thought of before, is passengers that had been on the Olympic and then been on Titanic, because Titanic only sailed for a few days. That's something I just hadn't really considered before. Even when we think of Captain Smith, he was on the Olympic. I think that's really interesting. And that was kind of why they gave him the Titanic, because they were like, oh, you're so used to being in charge and in control of these huge ships, you might as well take the new one that's even bigger, not by much, but is bigger. So Rhoda, she'd been on the Olympic. She had gone over to England. She separated from her husband and she wanted to go back home. So she went back home to America, and her sons were 16 and 13. The 16-year-old son, whose name was Rossmore, and her 13-year-old son, who was Joughin. Speaking of names that we don't tend to hear anymore. Now, Rhoda befriended a woman named Amy Stanley on the ship, and that's important to mention because a lot of what we hear of Rhoda's story comes from Amy Stanley. Due to reasons, it could just be that Rhoda really didn't want to speak about what she'd gone through, which totally understandable. But I first actually heard of Rhoda's story. This was years ago. So one of my I might have mentioned him on the podcast before. People are probably aware of him, but Paul J. Quinn is a Titanic artist, and I fell in love with his work in like 2006, 2007, like probably even earlier, to be honest. Probably even before like YouTube existed. So this might be like 2005. This was a long time ago. And he had a website, and I would just sit and look at his paintings and his what looked like almost like MS Paint drawings for like hours. I was obsessed with them. And he would type really long captions with them, which I now know were actually like excerpts from his book. The two books which I now have, Dusk Till Dawn and Titanic at 2. And there's a section in the Titanic at 2 book which is kind of dedicated to Rhoda. He gets a couple of things slightly wrong, but to be fair, it might not even be wrong in that it's possibly just there's conflicting accounts of where she was when the ship went down, and what he's kind of chosen the one that he thought was the most dramatic, or the one that he could kind of play on in terms of artistic license. But she did actually end up on Collapsible A, so it would stand to reason that she was at the front of the ship when it went down. Because if you were at the stern, you probably weren't really going to be able to swim over to Collapsible A, which kind of drifted off the ship, the boat deck, at like 10 past, 2:15. Like, you'd be super lucky if you'd done that. But she had her 2 sons, and she was holding them. The 16-year-old Rossmore had been told that he was not going to get on a lifeboat because he was a man. And so Rhoda said, well, if he's not going on, I'm not going on. And, you know, that's that, basically. So her and her 2 sons just stayed on the ship. They got around, it seems, the front side of the ship where the Collapsible A was being prepared. And they probably would have got onto that okay. But then obviously that became flooded. It became very overcrowded. The bridge went under. And in the commotion and the sudden kind of wave of water, she lost grip of her 2 sons and they both died. She was able to get onto this boat, but the boat was so full of water that a lot of people actually died in the boat. The passengers were transferred to Collapsible D by Officer Lowe, I believe, could be wrong. But the Collapsible A was then just kind of set adrift, and 3 bodies were found in it by Oceanic, I believe. A good couple of weeks later, they just found Collapsible A drifting with 3 bodies still inside, and that had been the boat that Rhoda was in. But so this woman, she survived, but her 2 sons had died, and she'd been holding them, and she'd refused to get off the ship for the reason of her 2 sons. And I can't even imagine, like, survivor's guilt is bad at the best of times, but to have survived and to be feeling, how did I lose my grip? Why did that happen? Or to even be thinking, he was 16, how did he not swim to the surface? Like, what happened? Like, it's always stuck with me from 2005, 2006 when I first read that account, because it's just so harrowing. It's so awful. But Paul J. Quinn also, and this is true, she actually had like fractures. She had a broken rib, which it could be deduced that it was actually from debris from the ship, kind of being propelled upwards from below the surface and hitting her. Amy Stanley, who I mentioned earlier, actually spent a lot of time trying to remove pieces of cork from Rhoda's hair. The cork, which we now know, was used to line the refrigeration walls of the kind of refrigerated areas of the ship. But, this ship didn't break. So how was there cork floating around? Lol. But yeah, so this poor woman, she had like fractured ribs, cork tied up in her hair. Her 2 sons had died. And very recently, I saw a letter that a friend had written to her in the 20s about, just corresponding, just chatting. And it was very much how's the weather where you are? And they were talking about the weather, and it was snowing. And Rhoda's response was just so sad. She just said that she used to love the snow because she still has Eugene's sled. She can't look at the snow anymore because it just reminds her of Eugene. And this was in like the 20s. So 10 or more years later, she still just has not, and how could she? And I think, and I was talking to my partner today about it, because he asked what I was going to talk about on the podcast, and I said Rhoda, and I told him the story. And I just said, I was like, I think people really forget the real humanity of it. And reading that letter, which was from like 100 years ago, essentially, really kind of exemplified that this poor woman who had gone through something horrific couldn't even look at snow because of the Titanic. But we've got inflatable slides, so it's fine. And we've got Lego sets, so it's cool. But yeah, but I think her story, it's miraculous. The fact that her two sons perished, but she was able to get onto that boat. The fact that even though it was full of water, she didn't freeze. Her legs were severely affected. She couldn't walk. They said that they might actually have to amputate them. That happened to quite a few people. Potentially someone might mention one of them. But hers has just always really, really stood out to me, because she was really lucky, but in so many ways she was not lucky. And even just the fact that her name, she was referred to as Rosa for pretty much the rest of her life. She kind of embraced it a little bit. She was like, yeah, cool, Rosa. It's not my name, but if you want to call me Rosa, that's fine. So yeah, that was the passenger that I thought deserved a little kind of highlight and a wee bit of attention, for pretty sad reasons, but it's the Titanic at the end of the day. So, so that was mine.
That's really interesting to hear that, because I've seen that name so much. Like, I've heard like Rhoda Abbott, but I never actually knew her story, and I never knew any of that. And just as you were explaining that, that's just kind of made me feel like how she must have felt knowing she's let go of her sons, and that was the last time she's ever going to see them again. It's just quite unreal, really.
Yeah, you did her story justice. That was tough. Sad.
Oh.
I was hoping someone would bring up Collapsible A though, just because, I mean, although no one survived, I think that's crazy that even happened. So yeah, that's crazy too.
Yeah, I think in the end, 13 people were found when Collapsible D obviously kind of came upon it just before Carpathia, and they transferred them out because it was full of water. They were probably going to die of exposure just being in that lifeboat. There's also reported rumors that the Allison family, the only first-class child who died, Helen and Bess and Hudson, the mother and father, who were looking for their son who'd been taken by the nanny. They survived, but the parents and the daughter didn't know that, and so they refused to leave the ship and they died. There's rumors that they actually got onto Collapsible A in the commotion and died on it, but were pushed overboard before Collapsible D approached. So that's not super confirmed, but the three men that did die and were found like 2-3 weeks later by the Oceanic, another ship which I'm pretty sure Captain Smith captained.
Yeah,
I think
early on in his career.
Yeah, there's footage of him walking around the Oceanic, and it's quite a distinctive ship. So yeah, Collapsible A's story is just super wild. It's and horrific, but like we say, it's Titanic, and it's kind of inescapable. Like we can put a spin on it at times, but there's other times where it is what it is. But yeah.
I feel like both the Collapsibles that ended up being washed off the deck, A and B, both have got incredible stories. Mine's about Archibald Gracie, because it's just like such an amazing account. Hopefully no one else had that. Otherwise, I've got a backup. Seb, I'm looking at you.
You're safe. You're safe.
Oh man,
my backup's Charles Lightoller, in case. Though I'm waiting for someone to say.
Oh, I have like 3 in mind.
Okay, cool.
So
Yeah, I mean,
just like bingo or something.
Yeah, because like those are 2 people that end up being in the water and then on top of Collapsible B. So I think they've both got incredible stories, just because of the chance of those being washed off and people still manage to get away on them is incredible. So yeah, I think those have got some amazing stories. And obviously the most famous passenger from Collapsible A, Caledon Hockley.
Of course.
Who a couple of years later put a gun in his mouth during the Great Depression. It's
or so I read.
Or so I read, yeah.
You gave me hope, Louis. You gave me hope, and then you took it away.
Oh, come on. I can't be serious for too long. Someone's got to lighten the mood when we're talking about death. Otherwise, people are just gonna.
It is
don't know,
true.
right?
It is true.
I know. But I think if people, because I did think that earlier, if someone, say, just for argument's sake, Dean and Presley both had the same person, they thought of one, which I didn't say how many, I only really thought of one because she's the one that stuck with me for like ever. Like I'll be thinking of Rhoda till the day I die. It is what it is. But that's fine. Just go into it. Just speak about, just expand upon the one person. Like that's totally cool. But
I also think
Louis,
we have different reasons for picking people. Just adding that in.
that's a really good point, actually. That's a really good point, Sebastian. So I'm not worried about that. But it was something I thought about. But then I thought, you know what? If it happens, it's fine because, like, Lightoller, even Gracie, I'd considered him. But because they were two men that both wrote books, I thought potentially they're people that there'll be a lot of awareness of. When I say a lot of awareness, to a certain group of people, the average Joe that came across this video on YouTube would be like, who? Like Gracie? Like, but Louis, I think move on to you next because you've mentioned who you have kind of chosen. And I think you've whetted our appetites and probably the listeners' appetites as well. So put us out of our misery, and on you go. The floor is yours.
So, I'll start off with Archibald Gracie anyway. Sorry, Seb. I mean, I chose him originally because that is the first book that I read all the way through. I'm not a book reader. I still haven't started Titanic Day by Day by Simon Medhurst. I'm about halfway through Titanic Sea of Glass, even though I bought it about 3 or 4 months ago, purely because I'm not a reader. But that's one that I was reading on my commutes to and from work, and that's only recent. That was like about 4 or 5 years ago that I read that. And I think it was the first Titanic book that I actually read. Because before then, I'd pick up the books when I was younger and I'd look at the picture and go, that's a cool picture, that's a cool picture, that's a cool picture. So that's the first one I read, and it was such a strong account of what happened and what he spoke about. I believe he even speaks about how he felt like he had a connection with his wife at the time, or she said she thought about him at the time and was like, I feel like something's wrong. And that was at like 2 a.m. And like, there's no way she could have known that. And I just think the fact that, he spent the whole time helping people to the point where he was then washed off the ship, pulled underneath, stuck underwater for what he says feels like a couple of minutes, and then somehow managed to get out and onto Collapsible B and survive the night is incredible. And not only that, he's in A Night to Remember, he's featured in that. I'm not sure if they actually name him in there. But, he's got these 2 portrayals. He's got A Night to Remember where he's, they portray him as this sort of, I'd say, middle-aged man, which he was when he was on the Titanic. And then you've got the 97 movie where he's portrayed as like this old man with like grey hair and a grey moustache and like, oh, follow me, I'll help you, and like walking really slowly towards the front. It's like you've got 2 very different...
Women and machinery do not mix.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, for the casting of the 97 movie, how accurate they got some people, I'm surprised that someone with such a harrowing account of what happened that day got such a weird sort of casting, because there are photos of him with grey hair, but I believe he died a year after the Titanic sank, and his hair like went white like shortly after the disaster. But beforehand, it's quite well known that he was he had dark hair.
So stress.
Yeah, the stress. He had this like twiddly moustache, which I think they got really well in A Night to Remember. And welcome back, Arron. I just think the account is incredible. Being stuck underwater. I can't imagine what was. He's written it in the book, but that's written with retrospect. Like the thoughts that must have been going through his brain at that moment while he was underwater, freezing cold. The ship's gone down. My dog's barking. Doesn't know if he's going to make it, and somehow gets onto Collapsible B. Eventually with Charles Lightoller, who I was going to talk about as well. For being pinned up against a vent and then blown out at the last second. These are just incredible stories. Seb looks confused Like, don't tell me.
Yeah, because I just realized I'm happy you took Gracie, because I mixed him up with Lightoller's story.
Well, they have a similar thing. So I think with Gracie, he got pulled down, and I think the theory is, I might be getting this completely wrong, is that he was being pulled down the open hole left by the first funnel, and then managed to get out. And it's possible that, you know, him and Lightoller got out from the same hot blast of water, you know, and that's why they both got up. But Lightoller's is, he was obviously by Collapsible B, helping set it up, and then as he was walking back, the ship went under. He got pinned up against this vent. It was like, you know, he was going to drown. There was water sucking him back, and then eventually just a hot jet of air just pushes him to the surface. And then he manages, you know, after all of that, all the emotions, all the fear, the panic, and, you know, the bodily sensations, you know, the cold, and what it must do to your brain. I mean, I jump into a swimming pool, and for the first minute, I don't know where the fuck I am. And for him to then get onto Collapsible B, organize it, balance everyone, and survive the night like that is just insane. I couldn't comprehend. I can't comprehend it, you know. I have released the space bar.
Yeah, like, do you know, it's really funny. Anytime I'm drawing the ship and I draw the starboard side, and you've got the officers' quarters, and it's like a long row of windows, and then there's a little curve, and you get to the grand staircase. But in that little curve, there's this green kind of metal painted machine.
Yes,
thing.
it's the lifeboat winch. So that's for the emergency lifeboat to pull that one back up.
So there's a
where
little
Cal finds the
contraption.
girl in the '97 movie.
Yes. And that's where Gracie, I think, states that he was. And I think he refers to it as a cul-de-sac, which I guess it is. You know, if you're driving around like a street and you come into a little section of houses that are in like a little curve, and there's no way out of it other than the way you came in, that is a kind of so yeah.
I believe he climbed it. Did he climb it? I think he climbed it and went onto the officer's roof.
Yes,
and that's where he got pulled down.
I think in the '97 film you actually do see him, because is he not wearing white gloves? Possibly I'm not sure, but
I think
in the scene just before you get that amazing shot with the kind of the choir coming in with A Building Panic, you know, that James Horner track of the full pan up the ship sinking, you do see a close-up of the kind of that section of the ship going down. And I'm sure you do see Gracie, but I think from reading his account, he seemed to be kind of almost have his back up against that wall in that corner from the officer's quarter to the grand staircase. And when the water came up, obviously he was lifted off the ground, but he seemed to have pushed his foot off of the winch, and that's what helped him get up onto the railing on top of the officer's quarters. And just that, the fact that, you know, people like us, you know, we have this, even if it's on a limited awareness of the ship itself and the boat deck. So when we see these things, we're able to connect it with different accounts and different people. His accounts, it's incredible. And just when you were saying there, the casting of the '97 film, there were some people, it was like James Cameron went super hard and was like, that's them reincarnate. But then there's other people, like I always think the person he cast as Lightoller was a bit too, I don't know, because Lightoller had quite a broad, very
this guy's got a very sharp jawline and you know, very attractive cheeks like that.
Yeah, the guy in the Lightoller in the '97 film looks like a human kind of like dash hound, like quite slender and quite slim, whereas Lightoller had quite broad, like quite a brooding forehead. Like
I feel like a lot of the officers don't look as. I feel like what they've done is a classic Hollywood thing where they cast someone better looking than, you know, the real life counterpart. But then for some people,
I actually think Lightoller, like the real Charles Lightoller, was much better looking than, I don't know who the actor was that played Lightoller in the '97 film. But when I see photos of Lightoller, I'm like, I don't know if it's daddy vibes.
Oh no,
it's something vibes.
I was
It's
wondering
like
when that would come back into it.
it's like aye, Captain vibes. You know. Hey, I had to get in here somewhere.
It'd be rude not to.
At least it wasn't Thomas Andrews this time.
It wasn't. But yeah. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. So yeah, thank you, Louie. Yeah.
I wanted to add that so I'm from Colorado, and it actually just snowed here yesterday in the middle of May, and like it's easy to forget how cold that water really is. I think it's insane, like being pushed under, that's scary, but like even when I'm up here in the mountains, you can't even put your feet in for like 10 seconds. It hurts. And I hear those stories and it terrifies me to be in that cold of water.
Yeah. But it's like, as I said, when I go in a swimming pool, I forget, obviously not for a minute, but like for a few, like the 10 seconds, I sort of get up above the water. And I'm like, right, I need to adjust my breathing. I need to adjust this. I need to think, start swimming. That it's like but ice cold water, it's something different,
It's like 1,000 knives stabbing you all over your body. You can't breathe. You can't think. At least not about anything but the pain.
And I am putting a post-it note on my screen in front of Aaron's face. So, guys, I'll take over.
But I'm so handsome.
So I'll take over from here. So, who would like to go next?
I'll go next because, right, I'm going to, full disclosure, I am awful with names. And my
name's Louie.
It is.
Funny.
Your name's Lois. Your name is Lois, and you will like it.
Just like Rhoda.
Peter.
Yeah. So I'm awful with names, and my expertise is more the layout of the ship rather than people. But so I'm probably going to be the person I've chose is one that everyone probably knows, and it's the chef. Is it Joughin? Probably butchered the name, but
I've always said Joughin because it's spelled the way that you say like coughing minus the G.
Let's go with that.
Joughin. I think
Joughin.
It's Joughin. Joughin. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I was going to go with him because
it better be because I did a full. Sorry, just to cut. It better be Joughin because I did a full fucking video essay. It's like 40 minutes long, and the whole time I said Joughin. So I'm just like fingers crossed it's Joughin.
It's going to be like Benedict Cumberbatch saying pen wings.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to refer to him as Charles the Chef, just because I don't want any hate. But yeah, I just find his story so interesting because obviously he was a chef on board, and then during the sinking he did everything he could to help people. So I was just brushing up on his story a little bit, so I had a bit more to say. He was a chef and he survived. I'd found out, so like obviously he was off duty when it all started, and like he'd felt the crash and everything, and he wasn't that fussed about it until he got on deck. And I'd even read apparently he was originally put in charge of boat 10, but he decided not to take his seat because there was already crew in the boat and he didn't want to take up space that could be given to a woman. So yeah, he spent the rest of the sinking like trying to help people into the lifeboats and did as much as he can. And then once the boats had been lowered, he went down to air deck, and I believe he testified he threw around 50 deck chairs off the promenade deck to help people, and which is actually depicted in a deleted scene in the 97 movie, which I think is really cool. And he also has like a fairly big part in A Night to Remember as well. Like he's looking around the kitchen, and a lot of the sinking time is actually devoted to what he was doing. So yeah, after he helped, obviously went back to his cabin, had a bit to drink, to fortify him a little bit. So I think that helped him out later as well. And I was just reading some of his testimony where he said after he'd been thrown off the deck chairs, he made his way to the back of the ship. And he said when he was on the aft well deck going up to the poop deck, the ship kind of lurched over to port and threw everyone over to the side. And he made it right up to the poop deck. And I remember him saying, like, once the ship had started to sink and go down, he said he just stepped off it and it felt like an elevator. He just stepped into the water. And somehow miraculously, he said he managed to tread water for about 2 hours, didn't feel the cold. And then once the daylight started to break, he saw, I believe it was Collapsible B, the upturned one, and swam over and was rescued without even getting his hair wet. And I just think that is insane. Like to manage to go through from being in charge of a lifeboat, not getting on, to staying alive for 2 hours in the water because you had some whiskey. I just think that's absolutely incredible. And it's nice to see the films have given him some screen time as well. And yeah, I just think that's really cool, like how he managed to do that.
He's got an incredible story. And I love the depictions in A Night to Remember. You know, they actually dedicate time of him going down to his cabin, grabbing a drink, going up, coming down, the water level's risen. So you're getting that sort of
Testing it
how
with his
quickly
foot.
the ship's going. Yeah. And then, you know, in the 97 movie, he's one of those characters that sort of like, you'd know if you're like an enthusiast, a Titanic enthusiast, you'd know. But for the average viewer, you'd be like, oh, look at that guy standing there doing that. And I believe there's a cut line from the script.
Hell of a night.
Sort of, hell of a night, yeah. Looks at Rose as the ship's vertical, looks over and goes, hell of a night. Yeah, I think they cut that for a bit of a tongue-in-cheek moment. It's sort of like a wink at the camera.
Could you imagine though, like, because that was my one little thing I was going to say, like, that it would have, I get it, because there's people like falling, like breaking their back off like railings and stuff. But I just think, what an excellent line if he just looked over at Jack and Rose and went, hell of a night. Like, because it was a hell of a night. He's not wrong, you know, where's the lie? Spot the lie.
As long as he didn't start singing "Oh What a Night," you know, I think then we'd be all right.
Well, I mean, when Dean said he just swam around for 2 hours, like staying alive, I was like, staying alive, better be Dean, you know. But
So
yeah,
water aerobics and whiskey.
Exactly. But he apparently didn't even get his hair wet. So like, his story is wild. Like, and I think the takeaway from it is if you're ever on a sinking ship, get fucking wasted.
That is a thought that I've always had.
Yeah, do it. Why not?
That's the reason why they call that booze.
What I would do, yeah.
Like literally just throw anything off the ship that, as long as you're not like that drunk that you're throwing it on, like there's people in a lifeboat rowing away and you're like throwing chairs at them and like, stop, like don't do that. But yeah, just get super drunk and throw stuff into the water and you're good to go, basically.
I feel like if I was to go on a cruise ship, you know, I'd take an extra suitcase filled with alcohol, even if the customs are like, excuse me, what are you doing with that? Mind your fucking business. If you think I'm getting fucked.
Excuse me, can't you see this is my first aid kit? Clearly.
Exactly. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if it's just me. I don't know if any of you've noticed it as well. But does anyone think that A Night to Remember kind of, even before the sinking, kind of frames him as a drunk? Because there's that scene, you know, where he's in the kitchen and he hands the piece of paper to the other chef and he signs it. Just the way he looks around the kitchen, it looks like he's on something. And I don't know if that's just me and if that was intentional, but yeah, I feel like A Night to Remember have kind of said like, oh, there's a drunken chef. You know what I mean? Has anyone picked that up?
I've not picked that up. I don't remember the scene with the paper. I just remember the scenes of him going back to the cabin and sort of looking around, like, you know, bemused about what's going on.
Yeah, it's in the bit, you know, in the bit.
Thought.
Yeah, it's in the part of the film where they're basically closing the ship down for the night. You know, you have like the people that are setting the tables, they're turning the lights off. It's kind of intercut with that, like going around the ship. I'm pretty sure it's like just before that weird zoom in on the rocking horse. But yeah, it's just a little throwaway moment. But he hands his paper and he just kind of like stands up and looks around. He kind of looks like he stumbles slightly, and I'm like, are they trying to imply he's already a drunk? But I don't know. I just thought it was interesting.
Play him definitely. He is the comic relief of that film. You know, if Kathy Bates is the comic relief of '97 Titanic.
How about a little ice?
But, that was another missed opportunity.
That was cut.
It was filmed.
So many things wrong with that.
I mean, first of all, the room would have been shut.
Exactly.
I've always thought though that would be my room. Like if Titanic was a thing like nowadays, or even if it had been a thing then, I would have just, and if it had been open to like that time of night, I'd be in that room just having like all of the cocktails. So you know, I don't blame her, even though it was shut at that time. I don't blame her. Although if anyone could get them to keep a room open, it would be Molly Brown. If anyone could be like, you're closed,
to throw him off,
I think not. Open up right now. Like it would be Molly Brown. She'd be like, open that bar, you're not closed, you're not going to bed, I don't care how long you've been working, I need a drink. Like you know,
Not only
Dare
was
I-
she unsinkable, but she's unstoppable.
Mhm.
unstoppable.
I mean,
Dare
wasn't
I,
it? Didn't they let her in like the first class smoky room and she was playing bridge with Mr. Astor, or was that just something that is
Oh, I don't
something
know.
else?
I don't know about that, but
I
I've got a
wouldn't be
feeling
Sounds
though-
plausible. It
I've got a
does.
feeling that if she was around today, dare I say she could be classed as a Karen?
Possibly.
Presley's giving me a very, very evil stare right now.
Well, because like unfortunately, I think you are kind of right.
I know that's the I can just like the scene where she's like, "You've got us all dressed up here now. We're cooling our heels." That's essentially, "Can I speak to your manager?"
I don't think anybody knows what the hell's going on around here.
That's essentially Molly Brown being like, "Hey, Sonny, can I speak to your manager? I need some more ice." Like,
I mean, like all the scenes in the lifeboat too. Like she is kind of the Karen in that situation.
and maybe Hitchens was just like really the first person that was like, "I'm not taking your Karen bullshit." Like, Hitchens was like, "I'm just doing my job," and Molly was like, "I'm a paying customer," and Hitchens was like, "People are dying, Kim." Like,
I feel like to avoid the accusation of sexism, we need to have a Kevin, and I can't think of a Kevin.
what's a Kevin?
So what's the Kevin?
male
Is that like an
Karen.
ultra alpha male or something?
A
guess-
Kevin is the term for a male Karen.
Cal's kind of a male Kevin. I know he's fake, but Cal, yeah.
I'm
He
thinking
tries
in
to
real
pay
life.
off Murdoch.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I think in,
your
I'm thinking
money
real
can't
life
save
though,
you
because
anymore
we've
than
just
saves me. Yeah, Cal, Kevin. I'm gonna call him Kevin now.
It's a thing. We created Kevin.
We create the Kevin. Yeah, but yeah, going back to Joughin though, one thing I found really interesting, but kind of because I wanted to draw something from his perspective, because the name will come back to me, but there was someone that drew the stern upright more so in the kind of 97 aesthetic of the stern being like super vertical, like, you know, really straight up, and they called it Joughin's vision. But obviously we now know that it didn't actually sink like that, and also Joughin in his accounts, plural, because he actually gave two very conflicting accounts, he never described it as being very vertical. He described it, and we've mentioned before the now infamous Honor and Glory render live stream where they have the stern sink on its side. How could they? Because as they say, they were using Joughin as the inspiration for that animation. I liked it. I
was
thought it was-
wasted.
It looks
yeah,
really
man
cool.
who was super fucking drunk. But he said that he rode it down, he rode the stern down, and he said he was sitting on basically the sign that says, "Notice this ship is a triple screw, keep clear." He said that he sat on that and was like, and just kind of went down and didn't even get his hair wet, like, essentially. But
Yeah.
what's super interesting is he thought he was sitting on because there were three of those signs. So there were two either side of the docking bridge, and then there was one on the end of the stern where the kind of flagpole is. It doesn't wave. The flagpole's very stiff. But the flag waves.
That's what she
And
said.
Thank you for clarifying that.
I know. The Titanic just had like a little dog tail just wagging the whole time it was like sailing. But anyway, so he thought,
As it sank,
or
it just went, oh.
that'd be sad. But so he said I was sitting on essentially the sign on the docking bridge, but then he gave another account that was like, maybe I was sitting on the sign that was on the tip of the stern. I don't know, because I was blackout drunk. So people kind of were like, okay, so you definitely weren't on this one because this one was underwater. You might have been on this one because this one was not underwater, but you also might have been on this one because this one was not on. So what? So basically we have Joughin to thank for the confusion over whether the stern sank on its almost side or vertical. Like, Joughin is kind of, because he was actually, I think, the only person to make it onto a lifeboat that went down with the stern and live,
Yeah. I
to
believe that's
my
correct.
knowledge. So any interpretation of the sinking comes from his two accounts, where he does actually give very conflicting accounts. Straight after the sinking, he said essentially that he rode it down like an elevator, but then during the inquiry and the commission into the sinking, he said that he kind of like slid off into the water. So he didn't really ride it down. He kind of like, but then it's like, well, where did you slide down? Did you slide down the hull like a little helter skelter? Like, what were you doing? Like, what? Which I wouldn't be surprised. Like, he was really drunk. He might just looked at the hull and been like, wee, and like slid into the water. Like, who knows? But
turns out he actually passed out in a lifeboat so much earlier on, and he just dreamt the whole thing in a drunken blackout.
I wouldn't be surprised if we were Joughin's dream. Like the ship didn't actually sink. Like he just dreamt the whole thing, and he's still doing it.
It was actually on the Olympic.
Yeah, we are Joughin's simulation. Life is a simulation, and it's Joughin's. That's the truth, to be honest. But yeah, Dean, thank you for bringing Joughin's crazy and super miraculous account to us all, because it's worth mentioning.
Both Lou and I have a Matrix moment right now.
we're in the Matrix, and it's all Joughin's work. That's excellent.
It's Joughin's world, and we just live in it.
Basically, yeah. And I love that for us. I actually hate it for us. Yeah, so we now have either Presley or Sebastian. Who would like to go first?
Stop being so fucking polite.
Okay,
Presley. Because Presley didn't sink in her chair, we'll choose Presley.
Yeah, I'm not hiding away from it.
I love that.
I'm kidding. So kind of like Dean was saying, I'm really not super big in, or I don't know the stories as well. But I just came up with kind of some honorable mentions, because, if you're doing this kind of podcast, you got to have some that just have to be mentioned in here. So
watch Mojo eat your heart out. Go for it.
Yeah, I just have some little factoids. So of course we got Frederick Barrett. I think that it's insane that, he was all the way down there in the boiler rooms when the Titanic struck, and you've got those watertight doors closing. I think that that's crazy that he even managed to survive and then went back to work after the Titanic sank. I think it was a couple weeks after he went back to work on the Olympic. That's crazy to me.
Can you imagine, going back in that almost identical boiler room? He must have had some kind of PTSD.
Yeah, I don't know. People are crazy.
Yes.
Right,
guys, if it sinks, this is what you do. Don't worry.
Been there, done that.
Ultimately, we are creating a how to survive guide. No, and then so I thought this was really crazy. Hugh Wilner, he was a first class passenger, he jumped from A deck into a lifeboat that was 9 feet wide out. Jumped into it. Like I think that's also really crazy.
I never knew that.
I know. Well,
that's
okay,
crazy.
You read that book, Titanic Voices by Henry.
I have that book somewhere.
Yeah, it's my aid today, and it has his account on it, and it's really cool because it's really just mostly inquiry stuff. And so I thought that was really interesting, because I didn't know that until last night. I was like flipping through, like, oh my gosh, who am I going to talk about? And I saw that, and I was like, how could you jump?
I forget the man, because it was him and another man. It was two of them jumped at the same time, but they were lucky that they jumped from the port side, because obviously the ship was. Well, actually, no, they were unlucky, because if you think about it, the jump would be further because the ship's listing, so the lifeboat's actually further out than it would be. But obviously they did it out of desperation, and I was always amazed that they weren't thrown out, because the idea is that in 1912 people were very, it's women first, and if men come into this boat, then we'll shoot them or we'll do something to them. But they didn't, and they lived. Like, these two men jumped into the boat, and everyone in the boat was like, hey, more people, cool, awesome.
Yeah.
Like,
it's here that it was Hogan Stevenson. I don't know if I said his name right, but yeah, it's crazy. And then my last person that I had was August Weichmann. I have no idea if I'm saying that right either, but he was the barber. And so I just kind of, as he was talking about Joughin, I had this little image of him throwing deck chairs because he actually made a little raft out of deck chairs and, you know, swam and spotted lifeboat A and ended up going into it. So I think that's crazy.
Is that the guy in A Night to Remember? You know, he's putting the deck chairs together and he's like shouting at people to stop trampling on it.
Yeah,
Must
and
be
then he
him.
slides down. And he's like, "Oh, for fuck's sake!"
Yeah. Wonder
Yeah,
if
I
that's
didn't
from
know
that.
Until last night, I didn't know that the barber survived.
Me neither.
Wow.
Yeah, and Arron, you did a drawing recently. I don't know why I felt like I was praising. You did a little drawing recently, where you showed
it on the fridge.
barber pole.
I drew my name on it, and I drew the sun. I drew the sun in the corner.
But
I didn't
you
know.
did a piece recently where you actually feature the barber pole. I can't remember
Yes.
whose testimony you said it came from, where they said they saw the barber pole in the water.
So it was based upon Arthur Puchin's testimony. So the barbershop, for those listening who don't know, yes, Titanic did have a barbershop because, you know, your hair wouldn't grow too much during a voyage, but your facial hair might. And, you know, first class men were not expected to shave their own facial hair. That was just like a faux pas. You didn't do that. So you'd go to barbershop and they would
I
do it
don't
for
shave.
you. Well, do you know what? You do you, boo. And yeah, but the barbershop was located on the sea deck at the foot of the aft grand staircase, which, yeah, when the ship sank and obviously broke, as we now know, it's believed that the barber pole was thrown out from where it broke. And Arthur Puchin, as they rode upon the Carpathia, he looked into the water and he saw the barber pole just bobbing around in the water. And obviously, as he knew where the barbershop was, and he saw this pole that he recognized and was like, holy shit, like, wow. Which that must just be so surreal. Like, to have basically lived somewhere for 4 days and then for that to like just be destroyed, and for you to have survived and to see little remnants of this place that you've lived just floating around you, like, I just can't even. It's the very visual things like that. Like, even I think when it comes to even Rhoda, like her being punched by bits of debris, by like tables, wood, cork, you know, while she's underwater fighting to get to the surface. Like, you know, in the 97 film Jack and Rose, like Jack gets dragged down and somehow reappears above water, and Rose just kind of goes back above water and they're fine. And it's like, great, like, lucky you, I guess. But yeah, I think it's very visual, very like almost dream-like kind of visuals that stick out to me. So but yeah, thank you very much, Presley. That last one I didn't know. I had never heard of that that final account. I had no idea, even though I knew about the barber pole. I knew the barber pole survived, but I didn't know the barber survived. So I like that.
What we're here
Ba,
for,
ba, 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 ba.
to teach each other new Titanic knowledge.
Exactly, that is what we're here
It had
for.
four
So
funnels.
it did, but the last fun. Actually, who was I talking to about this? I saw someone commented on a Facebook group and was like, "Oh, did anyone else know that the fourth funnel was fake?" And it was like, "Oh, bless!" Like, they've obviously just learned this, and they're oh, that was cute. But then someone commented and was like, "Yeah, it was made of paper mache." And I was like,
another conspiracy.
I was like, that's rude. Like, leave them alone. They're just, you know, they've learned something new and they want to share it. Like, don't say that.
Yeah,
Like,
you know, like we're talking about gatekeeping and everything. It's like some people's like entrance to Titanic might just be a top 10 facts, and that's like one of the top 10 facts you always get. It's like, oh, the fourth funnel wasn't actually a funnel.
so
It
it's
was
like, yeah, there's like
CGI.
there's layers of gatekeeping. So it's like we're gatekeeping the fake stuff, which fair, but then we're also gatekeeping the stuff that we're bored of. Like, oh, I've heard this 100 times. Like, you know, I'm just going to be condescending and rude to you now. And it's like, come on, like, because a lot of people might have read that, especially on a Facebook group that's getting like 1,000 new followers a week, and would read that and go, oh, I had no idea that the fourth funnel was fake. Wow. Like, but then you've got all these like staunch, like very ingrained Titanic enthusiasts that are like, sod off with your old news. Like, it's not fake news, it's just old news. And it's like, no, because one day you're going to die and it will be the new Titanic enthusiasts that carry the torch. So be nice to them. Like,
I see that all the time in those groups. I'm always there. Whenever I see a new post like that, I'm always ready with Titanic ship magnificent. I'm like, right, deck plans out. I'm getting ready to take pictures so I can help people. Like the Afghan staircase the other day, people were like, where is it? It didn't exist really. And I was like, here you go. Here's the deck plans. Highlighted it. Just help them. Don't be a dick.
Yeah, because even something like that, the idea that this really ornate, elaborate staircase, that there was essentially an like exact version at the back end of the ship, like it doesn't actually even make sense when you think about it. People are like, what? Like, that's crazy. But like it just existed. That was a thing. Like, so if people want to ask that, let them. Like, so yeah, totally. But yeah, that's
Presley, being in America, have you been to any of the Titanic exhibitions there? Because they seem quite big in America. You know, you got the Vegas one, and then you got the Dallas. Is it Pigeon Forge?
Pigeon Forge, and there's Branson.
Yeah.
No,
Florida.
I haven't been to Pigeon Forge, but when the 110th anniversary came around, or no, the 100th in 2012, they did the Las Vegas exhibit on tour, and that was really cool. I saw it in Texas, and that was really cool.
Yeah, I feel like that was in the UK at some point, because I remember seeing the big piece, but then in my head I'm like, the big piece is in Vegas. How have I seen the big piece? And that was like 2003, so I feel like it must have been here at some point.
And then because I'm here in Colorado, I've been to the Molly Brown house, which is always fun. They do a lot of fun Titanic stuff too. They'll do like Titanic teas and Titanic trivia.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Moving to Colorado.
I'd love to go. Yeah, moving to Colorado, absolutely.
You guys should. You gotta come check it out at least to see the Molly Brown house.
Totally,
And actually,
love to do that.
Here's kind of a fun random fact. You guys know what Red Rocks is? It's like this big amphitheater here in Colorado. It's outdoors and it's like this big Red Rocks. Have you guys heard of it?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's like this big rock on the side, and it used to be called Titanic Rock, and then people were kind of offended, and they kind of PC'd it, and now it's just called Ship Rock because it looks like the Titanic sinking with like the stern up in the air.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm gonna Google after this. That sounds fun.
I'm Googling it now.
Quick change of background.
Over the game.
That's so cool. And do you know what? Good for those people for being like, that's a little bit offensive. Like, let's not call it Titanic Rock. Like, that's that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Do
do you know what, actually?
Right one?
No. Do you want me to?
Because I don't see Titanic. I didn't want to just be like, no, Presley, it looks nothing like the Titanic. I was just like, okay.
I love that. Is this the right one? No. Absolutely not.
That one?
It's like directly on the side. It's like an outside amphitheater, and that's what they named it after.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, I can totally see. Do you know, in my head, that's more like a V-break, like the bow rising out the water. That's like a V-break rock. That's what I'm going to call it, V-break rock. V-rock.
Well, then I feel like there needs to be more Titanic museums around, because especially in the UK, there isn't really that much. I mean, I'm 40 minutes from Southampton and we have the CC, but even that isn't that big.
Yeah, that's pretty special. That's the one that's got the Olympic.
Yeah,
the
Honour and Glory carving. Yeah,
I've been.
And the Engineers Memorial as well is there.
Yeah,
so it's really cool. But that's about it.
So I decided to try and find it another way and typed in Titanic Rock, and I think I found a.
I'm
rock
scared.
band
Okay, I'll allow that.
Called Titanic, and they seem to have rusted pictures of the ship behind.
Nice.
That bothers me.
I hope Celine performs with them one day. That'll be fun. That's a crossover that I want to see. Celine doing rock with rusty pictures of Titanic in the background.
There is that Punk Goes Pop version of My Heart Will Go On, isn't there? Which is actually pretty awesome.
There is. One of my favorite things that's like a Titanic reference is at the very beginning of the Simpsons movie when Green Day are performing on like a little floating barge, and then people hate the performance, so they start throwing things at it, and it sinks their little barge, and it raises up. and they put their guitars down and they pick up violins and they start playing Neither My God to Thee. Or not, or do they play My Heart Will Go On? It's something, and it sinks
No, it's
like
Nearer My
Titanic.
God to
They play
Thee.
Nearer My God to Thee, yeah.
Yeah, because basically what they put down the instruments, and one of them looks around, it's like, gentlemen, it's been an honor. And then they
Yeah, that's pretty. There's also another Titanic reference in Simpsons, which is an old. It's the episode with Luke Skywalker actor Mark Hamill.
Mark Hamill.
It's the Star Wars episode. At the start of that, they're watching Titanic on VHS on their TV, and then as two people are sat in a boat, Titanic comes up behind them and opens its mouth, and opens its jaw, and just goes, ah!
Because it's like Jack and Rose are on the lifeboat, and it's like, don't worry, Rose, we've got this. Yeah, the ship comes along, and it's like, we interrupt this program for a special report. Yeah, I remember that one.
That's brilliant. I love that so much. That's great. That might actually make. I'm just get a little idea there. Before we move on to Sebastian, we've not forgotten about you, my friend. Our favorite kind of allusions to Titanic in pop culture. So an episode where we kind of talk about our favorite references to it, and TV shows or films, or even if we think it might potentially be viewed as offensive or disrespectful, like if it, for me, like the Green Day playing, like someone might view that as offensive, but that has stuck with me. And when I was like young and saw that in like such a huge movie in The Simpsons, it was like an opening scene. I was like, yes. But potentially like a survivor would have watched that and been like, no. Like that would be an interesting conversation actually to have one day. But
I think the get out for that is the fact that they're more making a pop culture reference to the movie rather than the actual disaster, which is how they could probably turn it around and be like, well, actually.
That's a good point, well made. Very good point. Well done, Louie. Anyway, Sebastian, we now come on to last but not least, yourself.
Speaking of least, because I was the one that was least prepared.
Not at all. No. So, yeah, the floor is yours.
Well, I had a little bit of a difficulty because my favorite person on the Titanic died. Very well related. Well, I think the closest one I can get on is Jack Thayer. He was in the family of railroads, sort of thing. Not that it has anything to do with my choice, but he's always one of the testimonies I found interesting, I guess, because he also was one of the ones that ended up in the water, and I think he's one of the ones that give me like one of the best insights of like the first class passengers experiences, because he's basically, waking up, waking his family, being in that sort of situation I would imagine myself being in with the topic of what would I do on the ship, because it's basically, middle of the night, you don't know anything. And that's kind of what sort of gets me about his story. Yeah, I didn't prepare much to say about him. But he's one of those. I also have this sort of the same thing that's said earlier. Is like I don't normally fixate on one person in particular. It's more like the sort of theme of it. Because I listened to the audiobook of A Night to Remember, and I really think that sort of made me look at the whole thing as a whole. Because there's so many small moments that I think are rather interesting, just in one sort of survivor's story.
No, yeah, completely. That's actually a really good point that you bring up. I mean, I guess for me, it's kind of the same thing. That the only reason I even know about Rhoda's whole story is from a random website in 2005, 2006. Like that's the only. If I hadn't been a fan of Paul J. Quinn's art, I probably would have never heard of that story, and therefore wouldn't have looked up later. Or if I'd seen her name pop up later, I wouldn't have recognized it. So really, if I hadn't have heard of her story, I might, like yourself, have just been interested in the kind of the collective experience of the people, or just the kind of ship. Like Dean had said, I'm not so much interested in like, or not that he's not interested, but it's like I more know about the ship's layout and the deck plans and the ship, as opposed to individual people and the stories of the passengers, because people do approach this from very different kind of takes. And I see a lot of people, even they don't really acknowledge the passengers, they acknowledge the ship. and it's not like a collective like, oh, RIP to the 1,500 people. It's like a rest in peace Titanic. You were such a beautiful ship. You could have had such a long career. You could have helped in the war. And it's like, the ship wasn't a sentient being. It was some metal and some wood. Like, stop it.
It reminds me of the people that have sex with their cars. Like, come on.
I mean,
Putting the hot rod in the hot rod. God damn it.
I want to die. Louis, is that the Simpsons thing as your background?
My background?
Yeah.
I've never noticed the fire coming out of the funnels before. That
Yeah,
is
it's
quite
wild.
It's already
that's an
sunk.
intense image.
And also, the ladies undressing for Troy McClure. My hand has gone missing. I do have a hand.
That's terrifying. That's actually terrifying. Wow. Wow. Jack Thayer, he got away on what lifeboat? Was it the same lifeboat
One of the
as
Collapsibles, I think, because I'm pulling it up
Harold?
on my other monitor.
It's
Yeah, Harold
Lifeboat-
Bride.
I pulled up my book. It's Lifeboat 4.
Lifeboat 4. Thank you so much.
Mm.
I was just reading. He was 17 and then he died in 1945. He committed suicide after his son died in World War II.
Oh,
Oh.
I know.
Oh wow. I had no idea. I did not
Thanks,
know.
Presley. Thanks.
Welcome.
Welcome.
It kind of pulled us into this, so.
There's
'Cause
just
you
so
know,
much I don't know.
Yeah, like Jack Thayer's one of those people. I think he's most known for being the one to not draw, but to recount the retelling of the sinking
yeah.
to something Skidmore, I think was his name, on the Carpathia, who drew this 4-sectioned drawing of the ship sinking with a V-brake, might I add. And Jack
Yeah.
Thayer was like, absolutely not. That's not what I saw. But that doesn't get remembered. And what does get remembered is that was a drawing. It was associated with Jack Thayer, and most people actually think that. Well, people not only think that he drew that, people think that Jack Dawson was inspired by Jack Thayer just because they had the same first name. A lot of people I saw, don't know if it was like BuzzFeed or Watch Mojo or something like that, but it was like a photo of Leonardo DiCaprio and a photo of Jack Thayer side by side in the thumbnail, and I was like, I didn't even watch it because I thought I don't need to, like I don't want to. But just because they have the same first
Cancels.
name, yeah, they're suddenly like interconnected for the rest of eternity. Like that's weird. I remember in A Sea of Glass reading, it was really interesting, like the evening of the 14th, Jack's parents had been just living their best life and they'd enjoyed the ship's band playing in the first class reception room, and Jack just kind of left his own devices because he was like 17 and he was like, I don't want to sit with my parents and listen to a band. That's embarrassing. Like, no. So he just did like his own thing and just, whatever. But just reading that, it was so human because it's like, yeah, of course, like you wouldn't want to, like, your parents are off like listening to a band in the reception room and, oh, they played one more song. Great. And Jack's like, like, I don't care.
I think
like,
Jack Thayer is seen in the 2012 miniseries. I think he's quite a prominent figure in that. It's either him or they've based someone quite a lot on him.
No, it
do
is
they
him.
not? They try and pair him off with Dorothy Gibson, do they not?
Yes,
Hmm.
I believe so.
And it makes me want to die.
They have a dance in the room that's supposed to be a dining room, and we're not sure what room it is because the 2012 miniseries was dog shit.
Isn't that where
Even-
Officer Lightoller's like, yeah, I'll happily join in, and he starts dancing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, then
Yeah.
he joins someone. Yeah.
Even though
And then
dancing in 1912 was like a faux pas, like people just like there's a reason that Titanic didn't have a ballroom, and even in the
Yeah.
dining room, it didn't have space to dance. Like that
The
only
Olympic did
became-
later on.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
moved some tables, didn't they, and put in a dance floor.
They got rid of some tables. Like in 1912, if you were like second class or above and you got up to dance like during dinner, you probably would have been like thrown off the ship. People would have been like, "That's dirty." Like what are you doing? Yeah, but yes. But in third class, it was like riotous. They were like, I'll twerk. Like, I'll do what you want. Like, whatever. But
And on that note, I'm gonna run to the loo.
yeah, we can have a break now. For as long as you guys want. It's still recording, but I can cut it from where we basically from Louie going dory dory dory. I can cut it from there, and we can we can pick up from whatever. But we can have a break just now, and then our next discussion can just be the kind of what would we have done kind of discussion, like, or what do we think we'd have done.
Really confused.
The next
Weird man.
part of our discussion will be, we've spoken about what various different passengers did or didn't do. I suppose in some cases, some people listening might be thinking, well, there's I think it was Cadenza. There was a husband that got into a lifeboat with Ismay, and he just left his wife on the ship and was like, lol, she'll die. And she didn't, and she sued him. For divorce. It was wild and crazy, but it's Ismay that's remembered as the man that snuck off of Titanic and not the husband that left his wife. So, we've thought of passengers who did or didn't do things. We've thought, how did they survive? What really, was it just some like miraculous, like Joughin, he was submerged in freezing cold water for 2 hours and survived. Or, you've got Rhoda, who she was very lucky. She tried to protect her 2 boys. They died, but she survived. And then you've got people like Lightoller, who were just doing their job. And I think the common theme with all of these survivors who didn't get into a lifeboat kind of when the ship was still above water, the common theme is luck. You can't really look at one thing they did and say, oh, that's what helped them. Because actually, everything was playing against them at that point in time, and everything probably indicated that they should have died, but for some reason they didn't. So it's been really interesting. So now the next kind of bit discussion, and I'm interested to hear where this will go, because I think there's a lot of ways that it can go. And I'm not expecting like a thesis on the answer, but if someone did have one, I love a good essay. So the next part of the discussion will be, what would we have done if we had been on the Titanic? So I can start again. I started the last time. I don't mind going first. I'll take a drink. So I hadn't considered this before today. Originally, I was going to say that I would have been like third class. Men were kept in the bow of the ship. They were kept kind of forward away from the women. You don't want any, shenanigans happening on the ship. Not that that would have happened with me. I'd been quite happy bunking with a few other men, very YMCA of me. But my partner then said, you actually, because I did nearly work on a ship. I applied to be an art gallery director and auctioneer on a cruise ship. I applied for a job with Park West Gallery, and I got the job essentially. But then one of the final kind of Skype calls with the woman who was essentially my manager, she was based in Detroit, on land. There were just a lot of things coming out, and I was like, oh, the pay isn't what was promised. We were told that it would be like our own room, and then we were told that we would be sharing with other people, and it was weird, and I ended up declining in the end. But my partner was like, what if you took a slightly different approach and you were a steward on the ship? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I might have actually been a steward on the ship, who knows. Either way, stewards weren't exactly second or first class, were they? They were still very much third class, and if anything, probably lesser than, because the whole point of a crew member on a ship is you're meant to ensure the safety of your passengers. You're meant to make sure that they're safe and that they go where they need to go. And if that means you're helping people out of a flooding cabin or corridor, then that's just part of your job. But before I kind of thought, so would I have survived or would I have died? I was thinking that some crew members were actually assigned positions in lifeboats. we had mentioned earlier that Joughin was actually, I think, Dean, you said lifeboat number 10.
Mhm. Yeah.
But he turned it down, which he's a bigger man than me, because I'd have taken that seat and I'd have loved every minute of it. Just putting that out there. I'm not, no, but there weren't a lot of, in fact, there weren't any drills. There were no lifeboat drills. There were a lot of crew members that I don't think even probably knew that they were meant to be at certain stations when this happened. There were a lot of crew that didn't even know the ship was sinking. Really, they didn't actually know that this wasn't a drill. They didn't know the severity. So it's not something I've looked into. It was a thought that just came to me today because of my partner saying you should look at this from the perspective of a crew member. But I think there's probably some crew people that could have been on lifeboats because that was their designated kind of muster station, but they didn't know, or they didn't know that they had to be there, that it was that serious, and so that they probably died. But potentially there would have been a few. It would have been men, but there would have been a few more people surviving, if they had known that. But looking at it, if I had been a steward working on the ship, I'm quite an anxious person. I think I would have spent quite a lot of time trying to find out if the ship was actually sinking. If something's going wrong, I like to know. I'm also quite solution focused. So if something's going wrong, I like to know what's going wrong, how can I fix it? So the first part of that is what's going wrong, the ship's sinking. How can I fix it? I can't. Okay, so what can I do? I can get off the ship. Okay, I have a seat on a lifeboat. My lifeboat is this one. Great. So, and that's just kind of how my mind works. I would basically get off the ship. But if I hadn't been assigned to a lifeboat, because obviously not every single crew member was, I don't know. I really don't know. I've always kind of had an affinity with Bruce Ismay, which sounds really bad, and I've always had an affinity with him, even the really kind of negative depictions of him where he sneaks into lifeboat. I've always, the 97 version, A Night to Remember, I've always watched that and gone, yep. Because I think I think I would have done the same. Like, I just do. Like, it doesn't make me big, it doesn't make me clever, it's not attractive. I don't care, but I think I would have probably just, the commotion of it all, have gone and just like slipped into the lifeboat's DMs, to be honest. So yeah. So yeah, but if I was third class, I don't know. I don't know if it would be. It probably wouldn't have been that easy. If you're visibly third class, you probably can't just do a Bruce Ismay. And I know he was very high ranking, but there were first class men that survived, and people judged them for it quite harshly. But if you look like you have money and you look like you're quite well to do, people aren't going to challenge you as much as if you're visibly poor and you're clutching all your suitcases, all your belongings. Like, I forget whose account it was, but there was a first class survivor who said that when they saw this mass of third class people run up to the boat deck with their, like, all of their belongings, like all holding their suitcases, the first class people laughed at them because it was just they thought it was funny, they thought it was hilarious, because the first class people didn't know how serious it was, but the third class people, their cabins were full of water. And also, they were moving. A lot of third class people weren't just going on holiday or weren't just going back home. They were actually moving home. So everything they had was everything they owned. So there was more of an onus to take things with them. So yeah, if I'd been third class and moving, it would have been a lot harder. So if I'd been a steward, I'd have gotten my position. If I hadn't had a position, I'd have snuck onto a boat. And if I'd been third class, I don't really know. I guess I would have given a hand at like cross-dressing, I suppose. I'd have been 6'4" and probably not have passed very well for a woman, but I'd have given it my best shot.
I
There you
feel
go.
like Yeah, I feel like you've got a great point. We spoke about it briefly as well. Ages ago, I think it was one of the Instagram lives that we did back in the day. And everyone likes to think that they would be the hero. Everyone likes to think that they would play the good guy and, be like, oh no, I'd stand back and let the women and children on first. I wouldn't dare enter. Even goes back to when I was younger and I used to play Roblox and they had Titanic games on there. And everyone's running around the ship and everyone's always on at the end because they're like, oh no, I'm not going on a lifeboat. I'm staying here, because they like to think that, I'm gonna be the hero. But when I think of it realistically, I've never been in that sort of situation. I can't put myself in the mindset of know how I'd act. The closest I've been is I was working in central London and we had a bomb scare in the office. They found an unexploded World War II bomb. They had to evacuate the building, and I managed to stay calm. It was in a post-production house where we had, clients editing television shows, and I managed to evacuate that building with the thought of World War II bomb could explode. So, I managed to stay calm in that situation because part of me was like, it's been there for many, many years. It's not exploded. So, in those sort of pressure situations, I've managed to stay calm. But if I was on a sinking ship, I'm getting the fuck off.
I don't think you can fault people for that either, though. Like, at the end of the day, especially once it got past a certain point and there's literal lifeboats floating off the ship, it's every man for themselves.
Yeah, I'm petrified to death as well. So the thought of standing back to die scares me. No, I couldn't.
I would agree with you there. Like, for me, for example, I mean, this is probably going to sound really silly, but when I'm playing Titanic Adventure Out of Time and you're in the sinking and I know I have 50 minutes to get off that ship, even though I've played it a million times and know exactly what to do, I still play that in a panic.
I've never got to that point.
What?
I get confused with everything and I'm like, where do I have to go now? What's this? I don't know what's going on.
I'm like, what's the playthrough? So it does seem like there's a lot to remember, and then there's this thing you have to give to this person.
Yeah, but I think like with me, like similar to what Arron said, like I'm quite an anxious person as well. So I mean, just ask my other half, like even if I'm just planning like a trip somewhere, like I have to be at a certain place at a certain time, and if he's like taking forever to get his bag together or whatever, I'm freaking out because I'm like, oh, we have to be here and stuff. So I think for me, if it's exactly, it's like this is it. And yeah, so I think for me, if I was on the Titanic, I think a trip like that for me would be something I'd be excited for. So I'd save up to get a really decent position so I could see myself as being like a second class passenger, because this is something I've saved up for. And I think if I was in that situation, I would most likely be like, as soon as I heard there was danger and we had to go up, I would be like, right, we need to go upstairs now. We have to do this. Like we've got to get out. And I would literally stand by that lifeboat. I wouldn't do anything else. I would stand by that lifeboat until I was told to get on it. And if that lifeboat went, I would move to the next one. And I'd be like constantly looking around and like, yeah, I would do everything I could to get in that lifeboat and I would stick with it. And then if they all went, I don't even know what I would do. I'd probably just panic and end up falling off and hitting the propeller or something.
So Dean's that one.
I'm that guy, yeah.
He's the propeller man.
I thought I recognized him.
Yeah. That's why I'm scared of brass.
Also explains the face.
Cheers, buddy.
Wow, Louie!
Whoa,
man!
Whoa. The Titanic.
It's fine. I understand he's jealous I've completed Adventure Out of Time. It's okay.
That's where it is. That's where it is.
Titanic's wreck is deep, but Louis' insults are deeper. But yeah, Dean, so is that, you've kind of given us your kind of I like that, because I can relate with that actually. The kind of just standing waiting, be like, yep, I'm getting in that boat. That's my boat. And then the second that it's full, there's like 13 people in it. But then I can be quite a Karen. We mentioned Karens. And I can actually see myself being a bit, there's like 14 women in it. And they're like, right, load away. And I'm like, whoa. No. Mate, nah. There was like 12 humans and 15 dogs in that boat, and there's like 60 empty chairs. I'm sitting on one of them. Like I'd cause a fuss. Like the ship would stop sinking because I told it, but I'd be like, no, stop. There's dogs in this boat. There's dogs in this boat, and there's kids running around. Like that's a faux pas. Yeah, totally. I can. Yeah. It's just awful. Like I hate that. Could you imagine modern day people on the Titanic? It'd be awful. It'd be so. Captain Smith would have
Costa
spent.
Concordia.
Don't.
It is the I wouldn't say direct comparison, not direct comparison, but like, you know, if you've seen the National Geographic, if you've seen the National Geographic documentary where they're interviewing people and they're like, you think of the Titanic, women and children first, there was no women and children first. You know, you've got people climbing over the railings into lifeboats. And, you know, what's even scarier is the mechanisms they use these days where they lower them slightly and then they drop. And, you know, the fact that those lifeboats hadn't been used and the winches were rusted, you know, and the sheer panic on board that ship, it shows that sort of, I want to say etiquette from 1912 is completely gone. There is no etiquette now. It's, I'm saving my fucking life. I'm not going down.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where just before we move on to the next person, again, I really only know this because I put it in one of my video essays. Captain Chapito, he not only evacuated the ship, but he left the ship before anyone else, got a taxi, and booked a hotel room while the ship was still sinking. The police knocked on his hotel room door and asked him to come out and speak to them while the ship was still sinking. That's how far away and how removed from the situation he was. He'd got off the ship in a lifeboat, got onto land, got in a taxi, and got a hotel room. And the police found him in the hotel room while the ship was still sinking. And
See,
I never knew that.
I didn't know that because I've heard the where they're saying, Captain, get back on the ship. He's like, no, I'm organising the rescue from here. He's like, no, get back on the ship. And he's like, no. You've got a similar one with is it the Oceanos?
Oh, yeah.
A full-length documentary on YouTube. Not only the captain, the entire crew are off in two lifeboats, and it's down to the musicians again to save the day.
I forget his first name, but it's something Moss, the guitarist name that kind of saves the day.
Because he did that twice, didn't he?
Yes,
he did it twice.
It's like it's probably heavy. It's probably like a what do you call it? An arsonist. He probably just enjoyed setting fires, just like lol, and just set fires and light ships. But the captain on the Costa Concordia, that very famous call of the Coast Guard being like, get back on your fucking ship, pal. The captain was like, no, and got a hotel, like, and just didn't, you know, and the whole time he's sitting in his hotel room, like unpacking it. Well, he probably didn't have a suitcase, but he's like just sitting in his hotel room, like chilling. His ship's slowly sinking and 32 people died. Like,
I'd imagine he was probably shitting himself in that hotel room. You know, probably sat there thinking, what have I done?
I mean, good. I hope he literally did shit himself. I hope that even his bed was covered in shit, so he couldn't even have a good night's sleep. Like, good. He deserves nothing less. But you're right. The point of the etiquette has gone completely, because this idea of the captain needs to go down with the ship, that's gone completely, as was proven in the Oceana sinking, which was like a good 20, 30 years before Costa Concordia. 20 years probably. So yeah, really good point. Dean, since you've gone,
2000s? Not sure.
Oceanas was not the kind of late 90s. Was it not the 90s?
I think it was the early 90s.
Possibly.
It was the early 90s.
They've got video footage of it, haven't they? But
it's the stern sinking. I love it. But no, I do love it actually, because no one died in the Oceanus. I don't think. I think everyone lived.
Everyone got off.
Yeah, everyone got off. They were all winched up 2 by 2 on a helicopter, which is just insane.
1991 it sank.
Wow, my God. I mean, even the fact that people were able to film it, like if it had been just 5 years previous, that probably wouldn't have really been the case. But you know, 91, fair.
But the footage of that is amazing, considering Costa Concordia sunk in 2012, and like it's like potato footage.
Mm.
It's like you
Yeah,
think it's something that happened like
totally.
that today. Everyone's got their iPhones with 4K cameras and all this and stuff.
I know. I think the difference maybe being that in 91 people would have had really expensive handheld cameras, whereas in 2012 people, okay, it was mobile phones with cameras, like, oh, awesome,
Yeah,
but the quality wasn't as good as a handheld camera in the 90s. So you've got that really brilliant shot from the helicopter of the stern of the Oceanus finally getting to a point, and it's quite a steep point, and you see the deck chairs start to slide down, and it's pretty steep. So those deck chairs have
Seb,
like
are you
really
okay?
good, like rubber grips in the bottom, like they're strong. Like, you know, whoever designed them deserves a pay rise because they were good. But then the water that's like erupting, like bursting out from the air pockets, it's like gray. So there's also a lot of like dirt and dust and stuff, like, and it's just, it gives you like a really good visual representation of what the stern would have looked like for the Titanic. So every time I watch that or see that, I'm just like, Joughin, where were you, Joughin? Where the fuck were you when all this spray and dirt was spraying out? Like, you cheeky boy. Like, where were you actually sitting? You know, because I think you're full of shit. But yeah, so yeah, awesome. So Dean, you've given us what you thought you would do and where you would be. Louis, I think you kind of started to tell us. So if you could just carry on.
Sort of, got my point across, really. I would have been out of there. I would have got off. If I think of my current financial situation and that sort of stuff and convert it back to 1912, I probably would have been third class. I work 5 days a week, 9 to 5, office job. It's not like a fancy schmancy sort of job thing. I don't think I would have maybe second at a push. The same as Dean. Like, I was saying Dean, and then I realised that you're over there on my screen. It's really weird. So yeah, like Dean said, it's just like I try and think, like, me and my wife Megan are looking at going on holiday this year, and we're looking at the price and we're like, oh my god, it's so expensive. Like, we need to try and find somewhere like a bit cheaper. And I'm thinking, if that was us on the Titanic, we'd be going, yeah, third class. It's going to get us there, isn't it? It's going to get us where we need to go. This is the same ship, cheaper, save money. We'll have more money when we get there. Probably would have been third class, yeah. In fact, I think there's, in A Sea of Glass, there's mention of two ladies that are sharing a first class room, but they've got like a small room, and then they're like constantly complaining about how it's cold or uncomfortable and not finished. I can't remember the names. Dean's nodding. I think you've read that account as well.
Yeah, I remember. I can't remember the names, but I think they were in like an E-deck cabin and the heating didn't work and it smelled strong of paint or something.
Yeah, I'm getting like flashbacks to Captain Smith cancelled.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like, I feel like, yeah, I would have been third class. I probably would have been in a bad situation, same as Arron said. Possibly got off if I managed to get up in time, I'm very much like, if I'm being told something by an authority figure, I'm listening to them. If they told me wait down here, I'd be like, okay, I'll wait down here until I physically saw something that would say otherwise. Because in my head, they know best. They're the trained ones. They know what to do in this emergency. I don't want to run off, because if I run off and then suddenly I get trapped somewhere and then I go back to where I came from and everyone's missing and I'm like, oh, fuck, I should have stayed here. You just don't know. So I think I probably would have got onto the boat deck towards, I don't know, just before the final plunge, maybe try and get on A or B, depending on what side I come from. Again, there's so many different variables. I don't think I can say, but I mean, in my mind, by the time I got to the boat deck, I would have looked for a lifeboat. I would have tried to get off, despite how many other people there are trying to get off. I can't die. I'm scared of dying. I'm petrified of death.
Yeah.
I have night terrors when I'm sat in bed and I'll sit up and I'll be like, I'm going to die one day. Fuck. And I'm just like...
I agree with so much of what you're saying, to the point where in 1912, I would hope that you and I weren't sharing a cabin, because I feel like we would have been bad for each other. Like, on our own, we might be quite still.
Arron, we're gonna die. I know we're gonna die. I'm gonna get on this lifeboat. I'm gonna get on this lifeboat. Fuck off, Arron.
I'm scared of dying, but on my own, I'd be like quite composed. But I'm not going to die. It's fine. Like it's, I'm chill. And then you'd be there and you'd be like, I'm scared of dying. I'd be like, me too. I'm really scared to die. And we'd both just like be crying in a corner somewhere and like, it's like pointing like lasers,
crying in a
like,
corner, making out and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
Water
think-
flowing in. I know.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, like I think the thing with this being third class, it's not just you're kind of born and you're third class and you exist in like a bubble. There's this you're taught to be third class. You're raised by parents who were third class, and they were raised by parents who were, it probably wasn't even third class, they were just like servants, and then they were raised by people who were like subhuman, and they were raised by people that were like dirt, like, so it's like this top thing. And just there, when you were saying you've got this respect for authority and that you would listen for authority, and I think I mentioned on the last podcast episode about this idea of learned helplessness, and it's just a thing. If you've never had agency, if you've never been able to make decisions for yourself, you're not going to have the confidence, the wherewithal, the gumption, the gall to be like, I'm going to go to a lifeboat. That's what I'm going to do, and just march up the lifeboat. You're not going to do that. You're going to sit, and people did. Third class people that survived. I forget his name. Olos something. Jorgensen or something like that. He was leaving the third class part of the ship and just saw people sitting in the hallways. So they'd left the room, they'd listened to the steward, they'd got up, they'd put the life belts on, but they'd packed their stuff, but they hadn't gone up to the boat deck. They'd left the room and they just sat in the hallways kind of outside the room, and they were just sitting waiting.
Yeah.
So it was like, right, step one was leave your room, put your life belt on, and they'd done that. But any other person would think, I'm going to now go and do what I need to do. But they were sitting waiting, thinking, what am I going to be told to do? And this was a survivor, saw these people just sitting waiting around. And these people probably, they would have been the ones that were the people that rushed up onto the boat deck a couple of minutes before the final plunge, most likely.
Yeah. There's also testimony of the third class passengers waiting around, and there's a door next to them that leads to the second class stairwell. So they could have just gone, oh, there's a door there, I'll go up. But they're waiting around by this open door, like, well, we can't go through there. That's second class. We're not allowed through there. We've got to wait here. That mindset. And the whole thing with my point, the way I was speaking was, I was speaking without any sort of retrospective thought. Retrospect is an important thing. Today we're sitting here and we can say, if I was on that ship, as soon as I found out it's sinking, I'm going up and I'm trying to get off. But that's because we've got the knowledge of what happened. We know what happened. Costa Concordia, they were told the same thing. They were told, go back to your cabins, wait there. And there was an Asian couple, I think it was, who had just got married. They stayed in their bedroom until the ship was almost on its side. Because they just went back to sleep. They were like, we've been told to go back to our cabins, we'll just go back to sleep, it's fine, cool. But now with retrospect of us here knowing what has happened in that situation, I feel like all of us here, something would go wrong, we're going to be like, we're being told to go back to our rooms. With the knowledge I've got from Titanic and maybe other disasters, I'm going to stick around the lifeboat deck just in case. We've got that sort of mindset of, because we're so into this sort of history lesson, we're like, we'll say here. Whereas without any retrospect, we've got to put ourselves in the mind of what these people are thinking. They're being told to do something. Third class being told to do something by an officer, they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's
even to the point. I want to move on to Presley next, and then Sebastian, just kind of the order that we had the last time, I think.
Yeah, that works fine.
Yeah, but just something I read very recently from Captain Smith, of all people, and it just kind of shows, because you get all these people that say, Smith, he was going as if he was like driving the Titanic like a car, but he was going through ice fields like so fast, and he knew there was ice. What was he doing? But he was also quoted, I think, not long after the Olympic was built, saying, I can't imagine anything that would sink any one of these modern ships today. So it shows the naivety of these people that they couldn't imagine, like, a ship is claimed unsinkable, or even if it's not, because it was the media that kind of claimed that. It wasn't really the crew or
Yeah, it was-
that was like
It was
a
the
newspaper
media and
thing.
JP Morgan, I believe.
Yeah. So Captain Smith saying, I can't imagine anything that would sink these ships. That was from his experience of being on them, probably like having a tour of them, seeing them being built, speaking to Andrews. Like, so
maybe
that was
also
from
like work experience, because he worked like several years of captain, and he's seen like more technology being put into the ship. So I'm thinking that may have something to do with it.
Yeah, they've got pumps, they've got watertight doors, it's got a double bottom, it's got more lifeboats than regular sand. This is the safest thing. And people say, people say like, oh, well, you know what, the Californian stopped for the night. Why didn't the Titanic? Because the Californian's a smaller ship. He's made this quote about big ships. It's not going to sink.
Mm-hmm. He's seen the evolution of ships. Yeah, totally. He's seen them evolve, and even to hear him say these modern ships, and to us in 110 years later, we're like, cute. Oh, bless.
The radar.
Yeah, but that's modern for him. And I saw somewhere someone compared Jack Phillips and Harold Bride to like essentially the modern day equivalent of like computer nerds, computer geeks who, because the Marconi system broke. It was not working. It had malfunctioned and was switched off. And on April 14th, 1912, that shit was down. That shouldn't have worked. But those two boys, because they were big brain energy, were like, we can fix this. We know what we're doing. And the crew and the captain were like, maybe not, maybe don't tamper with it, because I don't know if we're insured. Like, could you not? And they were like, it's fine. Go away. And they fixed it. They fixed it. They were smart. They were super smart. But if they hadn't done that, they would not have had a Marconi system to ask for help. The Carpathia, no one would have known where they were.
They would have had, but they wouldn't have had the range, because the thing was, the rules were, don't temper it, wait until you get to a port where a Marconi official can see to it and fix it, and then work off the emergency set. And the emergency set didn't have the range that the normal one had. And if I remember correctly, the emergency set would have been out of range for Carpathia, so they wouldn't have had the
Carpathia
ship.
was just out of range.
That was just out of range.
Yeah. And that was by them kind of breaking the rules almost, which I think is just incredible.
Going back to your cabins, sometimes it helps breaking the rules.
Yes, exactly. Totally. So Presley.
Yeah.
What? And do you know? And this, it's not. You are the only woman on the podcast as a co-host. That's a thing. But so I'm quite interested to hear your take on it, because the automatic assumption would be that you would survive. But we look at, there were first class women who didn't survive. There were countless second class women who didn't survive. So I'm really curious to hear your kind of take on this and what you think you would do as an individual.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I am in a different boat than you guys, because I'm a woman. I likely would have survived. But as mentioned, I could have been third or second class. But I still think I would have had a good chance. I think given 1912 terms, I'm 20. I probably would have been married off by now. And I think that for me personally, I would have had a tough time leaving someone behind. I probably wouldn't have been traveling alone, and I would have had a tough time. I don't know what I would have done. I've never been in that situation, but I think it's the survivor's guilt that, Rhoda lived with. I don't know if I could handle that. And I would feel really guilty leaving whoever I was with behind. I also, I'm currently trying to get into nursing school. So I think that I could kind of see myself as a nurse on the Titanic. It'd be a little Violet Jessup. So I don't know. There's different room for me in that situation, but I think I likely would have survived, and I would have had an easier time than you guys.
Yeah, when you were saying about having a hard time leaving, I immediately thought of, again, A Night to Remember. You know, you've got the newlywed couple that are sat in the smoking room with the smoking room with Thomas Andrews, and they're just sat there like, no, we're gonna stay together. You know, and it is interesting to hear it from like a female perspective. Like, you probably would have survived.
If I was Madeline Astor and I was pregnant, I'd be like, okay, I'll get on a boat. I've got a kid. I got to go live. But if I think it's very circumstantial, if I was newly married, I might be like, oh, I don't want to leave him.
Yeah, totally. And do you know, it's really funny that you said about Violet Jessup there, because before I came on to you, I looked at you and I was like, potentially, I might not be the only person that said that they worked on the ship. There might be someone else that, and my instant, obviously, because you're a woman, I was like, Violet Jessup, like, you could have potentially worked as, so yeah, it's fascinating. But this assumption that, to even be a child on Titanic, that you would live, as we said, that nearly 50% of the children on Titanic died. So, but then as well, that was mostly third-class children, but still, it makes you wonder, where were they? Where were those kids? They weren't on the boat deck. They were somewhere, but they weren't. If there were all these kids running around the boat deck, like playing and shouting and whatever, like officers would have been like, yoink, yeet, yeeting them onto lifeboats, but they were somewhere, but obviously they were below decks. But yeah, and even the point of, you're 20, you said?
Mm-hmm.
So you would have probably been married off, because I think Rose in Titanic's 97 Titanic is 17.
17.
Yeah, they mentioned that in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, so she's married off. So yeah, you're probably right. You would have been married off.
She's an actor. An actor.
Now, if I was married off to Cal, I would not have a difficult time leaving him.
I don't know. Billy Zane's kind of hot, but I don't know.
Now I'm just getting into the whole pitch you made on Instagram about Cher being the mother in Titanic.
Honestly, yep. If they remake Titanic, I think yes. Florence Pugh should be Rose. Cher should be Ruth. And I can't remember who the rest were. Oh no, Jake Gyllenhaal. Jake Gyllenhaal would be Cal.
Oh, that's good casting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can see that.
I can't see Cher though. After she ruined Mamma Mia 2, she
snap out of it.
Do you know what it was? It was because there was a photo of Cher where she's wearing an orange wig, or ginger wig, and she also happens to be wearing a very light pink and black kind of kimono thing, and it looks like Rose's coat that she wears during the sinking scene before she takes it off to go and to Jack. I can't remember who else I cast. Who was Jack? It wasn't Andrew Garfield. Was it Andrew Garfield? No, it was someone else. No, actually, I think it was Andrew Garfield. It was going to be Tom Holland, but then when I looked at Tom Holland and Florence Pugh, Tom looked very young compared to her, so I was like, no. So then I was like, Tom Holland, yes, they looked more appropriately aged.
Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, Andrew Garfield. What did I say?
You said Tom Holland again.
Oh, and yes, Andrew Garfield. He would have been a good Jack, I think, and Florence Pugh would be a very good Rose. But yeah, irrelevant. But yeah, that's the thing. Sebastian, I'm really curious to hear your take on this, because yeah.
No, I didn't prepare an essay, like I said before the podcast.
But
I did make some thoughts about it, because I was like, trying to translate, I guess, my life currently into 1912. So So I had the thought of like, I even Googled a few times trying to find the wages of a railway worker back then. I'm taking an education in railways, surprise, surprise.
Wow, that's so cool.
So I was trying to find out what is my possible future job going to be like. So I was thinking, with knowing a few railway figures on the Titanic, I would probably think third class would have been like, because the Danish guy I've mentioned in one of the previous episodes was like an engineer of sorts. He was a chief mechanical engineer, so I think he would have been higher up in terms of wages. I work at a depot, so preparing trains and so forth, I would probably have been in the lower places. So yeah, third class. I think I also would have been one of those like it's hard to tell because like I said, circumstantial. So I think I would just been like trying to find someone who knew, find some information in terms of the education system. I don't know how well my English would have been, so there may have been a language barrier. That's definitely some of the scenes I've noticed more when I've rewatched Titanic '97. It's like one of those small scenes where they're standing with a dictionary and looking at an emergency sign, going like, "Where are we going?" I think it could have been like a possibility of that. But my instinct, of course, would have been like to like get off the ship like everybody else. But it also would like, I think, would need the sort of information that the ship is sinking. Because if you don't know, if you're just told like, even in the movie, I don't know how, of course, how accurate that would have been with, but if the only information you've gotten is get up, get your life belts on, wake up, get your life belts on, you don't know what to do afterwards. It's not like everybody knows, oh, if this happens, we need to go on deck. So yeah.
Yes. Speaking of that, like not knowing. Sorry, speaking of that, like knowing, wasn't there like this? You just remind me of it as a survivor story. Wasn't there like a girl on the ship who didn't? She was put into a lifeboat, got on the Carpathia, and she didn't actually realize until she got to New York that that's not how crossings work. Like she generally thought being transferred to another ship was how it worked. So by you saying that, it just reminded me of that, like not knowing what to do. It's interesting.
I forget her name now, but it's on YouTube. It's like black and white footage. It's like archive footage. I think BBC archive footage of various. I think Lowe is one of the people interviewed potentially. But yeah, she is one, and she was like, "Oh, I didn't know. I thought it was quite exciting. I thought this was just part of it. I thought your ship reached a point and it was done. Your ship's got as far as it'll go. Very good, very nice. And you get onto a little boat and you row to another ship, and this ship takes you to where you go. And thank you very much." And when she found out that actually the ship she'd been on to begin with had sank and loads of people died, she was like shocked. That was like news to her. She was like, no idea. Yeah, wild.
If you're just pulling hand gestures, you don't know. If you're just like having an officer going like speaking in some language you sort of understand, not really, and then you're just following his directions into a boat, you don't know. It's
a really such a good point you bring up, like an immensely good point you bring up, because I hadn't really thought of this. The fact that James Cameron's film is the first film that shows people that are not white English people. Or
I mean, we start off with a poker game in Swedish, so
yeah, they might be white, but they're not English. Like, there's the scene where are they shown? There's definitely people shown when Jack wins his ticket and he's running to his cabin, but I'm not sure if it's definitely during the sinking. There's the kind of Muslim man that's like shouting, he's reading a book and he's pointing to the book and he's looking at the sign.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I think he is seen. I think he's briefly seen before then. It might even be in like the Titanic Explorer, the DVD where it showed like unused footage. I feel like that you can see him as well trying to navigate the corridors to find his room beforehand. And then later on, you see him trying to find the way out again. As Seb said with the dictionary and they're reading it.
Because, and again, it's one of those things. As a white man, a white cis man, I've never thought this. I haven't. Actually, I generally haven't. I've never thought of this idea of a language barrier before, with trying to get up to a different level, different floor. And it was Nathan, our fellow co-host, who can't be here tonight, but he messaged me and he said, I wanted to talk about, or what I was going to say, was that one of the things that I really appreciate about the 97 film was the inclusion of non-English speakers and showing the struggles that they had navigating the ship, let alone what to do during an emergency. And just for a bit of context, Nathan's got part Mexican, part German heritage. So he's got mixed heritage. But it says, and seeing as there was only one Mexican on board, which, you know, there was only one Mexican, he found that out. Although Nathan doesn't speak Spanish himself, he's sure that back then he would have found it extremely isolating. So if Nathan had been on the ship, he'd have found it really, because even Spanish speakers, I don't know how many Spanish speakers there would have been. But the fact that there was only one Mexican man kind of shows you they're probably coming from Southampton to America. There probably wouldn't have been that many people.
You've also got the documentary about the six Chinese passengers, which I haven't had a chance to see yet. I don't know.
I still need
is
to see
it
that as
out?
well.
I feel like it's out, but it's like hard to come. Like it's not on TV or something. And
it was delayed due to the pandemic. It was a whole thing. It's out, but it's out
in like certain countries. It's not everywhere.
Yeah, on certain streaming platforms, but in fact, I don't even know if it's on certain streaming platforms.
It might be on that. Is it Tubi, the one that's got Titanic 666?
Oh God!
I watched the trailer for that, and I don't think my toes are coming out from that cringe.
Yeah, it's that.
They've just reversed in on the boat.
Yeah, but you know how those six people would have felt as well. You know, they can speak to each other, but they can't speak to anyone else. They can't just say to someone, "What's going on?" You know, they can only communicate to each other and be like, "What do you think's going on?" I don't know. What do you think's going on?
I considered when I was thinking, it wasn't like a toss up, like, oh, what we'll do. I pretty much, I was always going to do Rhoda. That was always what I was going to talk about. She was my passenger. I forget his name. I don't know his name, but the man who in the deleted scene in the 97 film, we see he's tied
Fong
himself.
Lang? Is it Fong Lang?
I couldn't say yes or no. I genuinely, I don't know. No
I feel like
idea.
that's what it is.
You could be right. But he's essentially tied himself onto a bit of wood and he stayed afloat and he lived. But a few of the passengers also survived because they got into lifeboats. People say that, you know, they were hiding under chairs, but we forget that in that region of the world, sitting on the floor, that's normal. That actually to sit on the ground of something and not sit on a chair, that's standard. So when these white British American passengers saw these men, you know, on the lifeboat sitting on the floor, they might have very quickly come to the assumption they're hiding. They're trying to hide beneath the seats. They were sitting on the floor. That's what they do. That's not anything weird. And when these men got back to their home countries, they were ostracized and vilified for living because it was seen as dishonorable, to the point, you know, in ancient history in their countries, if you had survived a battle, you would have actually kneeled down and allowed someone to like stab you or like cut your head off and kill you.
The Japanese culture, they've got I think it's called seppuku.
You know, you would have just let someone kill you.
Presley has messaged to say that she has got to go.
Oh, Presley!
Sorry, I just didn't want to like accidentally end the recording or something.
No, it wouldn't have happened. But thank you so much for coming on. And I hope your brother has a great graduation.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations to your brother.
Thank you.
Bye.
And then there were 4.
I had a look at the name for the Japanese passenger. It's Masabumi Hosono. Probably butchered the pronunciation.
Most likely they special names.
Yeah, but he was the only Japanese passenger to survive. and got absolutely destroyed when he came back.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Reminds me
He
a little
brought
bit about
shame? Was it he
yeah.
brought shame on his family for surviving or something like that?
It's something like
Yeah.
the culture, because remember something similar with some of the survivors from the atomic bombs. It was like this teacher figure who later traveled around, but like a long time after he survived both Nagasaki and Hiroshima, his family kept him silent because it was like a great shame for the family or something. I don't see it myself, but it's in their culture, I guess.
Here's a little side random fact. Underneath his name, it says relatives. So this passenger died in the 14th of March 1939, but under relatives there's only one named, and it's Harumi Hosono, who's his grandson. And I've just had a quick look. He's still alive. He's 74 years old, born in 1947, and he is sometimes credited as Harry Hosono. He's a Japanese musician, singer, songwriter, and record producer. He's considered one of the most influential musicians in Japanese pop music history, credited with shaping the sound of Japanese pop for decades, as well as pop music outside of Japan.
Wow.
Which I think is really interesting. You know, if this Japanese passenger had died, then there wouldn't have been this hugely influential man in Japan who has got multiple, the 35 plus albums that I'm seeing here.
Wow.
Credited in 25 plus movies. Still alive today.
That's
I
amazing.
think that's just a lovely little side fact.
That's so cool. That could be a whole topic itself. Like what if like
Titanic have been?
Yeah, like what if all those mailbags made it?
Yeah.
You know.
have you seen the game where it's Titanic and you've got to spin the steering wheel to try and avoid the iceberg?
No.
And if you hit the iceberg, it says on it, you hit the iceberg because of this person was never born and this never happened. But then if you save the Titanic, it says, oh, well done, because of you, this person rose to power and started another war. And it's got these little
Whoa.
about
I'm getting some Titanic out of time vibes. you know, because you take the painting, Hitler becomes a painter.
But like I cannot wait to watch the sex documentary, whenever it becomes available, because the relatives that are interviewed, so the grandchildren or the great grandchildren, whoever it is, they had no idea until these, you know, filmmakers reached out to them and they were like, what are you talking about? We don't know. And it was because the actual survivors had been shamed into not talking about it. So they never spoke about it. So their children didn't know, because these men had been made to feel so guilty for living that they never mentioned. They're like, oh, by the way, I was on the most famous shipwreck in the world, by the way. They just never mentioned it. So these filmmakers obviously found it out through genealogy and family trees. And when they came to speak to them, the family members didn't know. They had no clue. And that was the first time that they knew that their granddad or their great granddad had been on the Titanic.
It's like Simon Medhurst, you know, he only found out 10, 15 years ago that his grandfather, great grandfather was the helmsman.
Mm-hmm. But then was that not through like adoption reasons? Like that was like a different tips.
I feel like there is. I'm not. Is he a blood relative?
He is a blood relative, but he's not like a direct blood relative. I don't.
Yeah,
think.
It's like a second.
Yeah,
it's
something. Yeah. But yeah, it's just incredible. Like it's, and the survivor that tied himself to a chair or a table or a door or whatever, and survived. I was gonna go for that, but yeah, Rhoda has always been my go-to when it comes to survivors of the Titanic disaster. So yeah, this has been a good chat. This has been great.
Really enjoyed this one. I mean, I enjoyed the last one as well, obviously, but I enjoyed this one.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, although my stomach is rumbling now. I can smell dinner.
Oh. Oh, damn it.
Oh.
Right, well, I released you. I released you all, co-hosts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And,
Thank you all so
yeah.
much.
It's been
And
nice.
it has been great. And on a separate note, Aaron, I feel like we've got a lot of Doctor Who stuff to talk about.
Oh, Louis.
There's been a lot going on.
Information. It was regarded as the most famous ship on Earth.
I got into, so there's a like super brief context. There's a kind of TV and film podcast that I go into a lot, and I was invited to go on and speak with Doctor Who because they announced the new casting of the new Doctor, who is black. It's a young male black actor, and I got into a bit of a debate with him, because he basically said that science fiction and Doctor Who especially has never been political and has never been like socially political and has never been used to further political and social ideas. And I basically was like, literally the first science fiction story was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And Frankenstein in itself is this idea of science polluting humanity and bringing people back to life. So like Frankenstein was essentially the first Black Mirror episode. So, I was like, this idea that I was like, shut up, no, you're wrong. I was like, you're completely mistaken. So it became like a debate like midway through. But yeah, Doctor Who, Louis, yeah, we should speak about it. We should talk about it.
Yeah, Shooting Gatwa is the 15th Doctor.
Yeah.
Well, there's the 14th, but I reckon something's going to happen. I think we've all seen the spoilers that's going around. I don't know if any of you guys watch Doctor Who either. Dean looks lost.
My dad's a fan. I could just never get into it. I did watch the Titanic episode though.
Oh,
naturally.
Kylie's Astrid, bless.
My name is Max.
It was purely coincidental. So Kylie, she released her album X in 2007, I think, but she also appeared in Doctor Who around that time. And her lead single for her album X was Two Hearts, which you've maybe all heard. The two hearts are beating together. I'm in love. Ooh, I'm in love. Ooh. It was like a quite jazzy, quite a slow number, but she's never done before. She's never done a song like that. But Two Hearts, who else has two hearts? The Doctor. And it was just a pure coincidence, but like, young me was just like, I loved it. It was great. I loved it. It was amazing. But yeah, Louis, absolutely. Time to talk Doctor Who. I'm here always. You know where I am. You know where to find me.
Doctor Who.
That one. The TARDIS.
A classic 90s banger. 70s.
Even though the song in itself is like utterly pointless.
Shit.
It was really funny because I forgot about this, but the episode I was invited to review the first episode of the revival of Doctor Who, which was in 2005 or 2006, with Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper. And there's a character that Billie Piper's Rose goes to talk to about the Doctor because he's been kind of like researching him for years in his shed.
I love him.
Yeah, and he shows Rose a photo of a family who were meant to go on the Titanic, but cancelled their ticket because a mysterious stranger told them not to go on. And obviously it's Christopher Eccleston, and he shows the photo. And I totally forgot about that. And I was like, there you go. All roads lead to Titanic. But then you also had Paul McGann. Paul McGann played the Doctor between Sylvester McCoy in the 80s and Christopher Eccleston in the 90s, in the 2000s. But it was like a film. It was like a one-off. They did like a movie, Doctor Who movie. And Paul McGann played the Doctor, and he was amazing. And they brought him back in like 2010 for like a one-off episode thing. But they didn't acknowledge him in the Eccleston run. But Paul McGann very recently found out that he had a relative on Titanic.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's cool.
Because I was really... Paul McGann was in the documentary. He was playing one of the cross-examiners at the
yeah.
inquiry, the Titanic inquiries.
Yep.
I love
So-
this role in that. Yeah.
Yeah, so Paul McGann has played like a man that was like interrogating people that survived the sinking. He's also voiced people in a podcast about Titanic. Like it was like writings from survivors. He kind of did like a voiceover. But he recently, it was through his brother. His brother was doing the research and was like, oh, by the way, Paul, lol. Paul's McGann is actually related to a Titanic survivor.
I'm on the show.
So there you go. So Titanic and Doctor Who are forever linked.
I even think there's like an audio story from Big Finish that takes place in it with like the 5th or 6th Doctor. I can't remember.
Oh, okay. I don't know that one.
Listen to it. I just listened to the trailer, so I know there is one.
My dad had someone reach out to him recently who was saying, I think we're related. And he was like, what? He was like, yeah, we're distant cousins. And she does all this family tree stuff, and Jean's reunited. And we found out that there's a crossover in our families, which is really interesting, a whole nother story. But I found out a bit exciting. They were looking into someone. They couldn't confirm it yet. They're still looking into it to find out. But they traveled to New York on the Oceanic. Oh, wow. And I found that out because they had the travel documents and like the paper saying Oceanic, and it had their name written on it. And I was like, oh. So someone in my family traveled on a White Star Line ship. That was pretty exciting.
That's awesome.
But the Oceanic,
That's
I was
amazing.
Like, I quite like that.
Try and find out what year that was, though.
I feel like it was 1908.
Because that might have been Captain Smith. Their captain
could
might
have
have been
been.
Smith.
I'm not. I can't remember. And then at the same time, we're not even sure if we're related to them yet. We're still trying to figure it all out. Because with my family history, it's really complicated. Because I come from a Jewish family. During World War II, they burnt all the Jewish records so that if the Nazis invaded England, they wouldn't be able to find us. Basically, they wouldn't be able to tell. So it's really, really hard to pin down any of my ancestry. But this person's done it, and that's why it's sort of like we think they're related, but we're not sure. We need to do some more digging. But there's the travel document that says they were on the Oceanic, which
that's really cool.
I had a little nerd out about. My dad was like, he said it. He was like, yes, they went to New York on the Oceanic, and I was like, Oceanic. And he went, maybe. I went, what's one of the Titanic cousins?
like just a random ship name, and you're like fangirling.
Just like it's like, oh, I've bought a film. It's called the Titanic. The Titanic. That'll be good.
Titanic.
The Titanic. Yeah, sure.
It's got this redhead and this like weird boy in it.
Yeah, that'll do. Brilliant. Well,
it sounds like a topic for like describe Titanic, the movie Titanic, to someone who's never watched it.
Well, that's an idea I've got for my brother. He's never seen the film, and he doesn't know anything other than briefly what I've told him. And he'll phone me, be like, "Oh, what are you up to?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm reading this," and I'll start telling him, and he's like, "Yeah." He'll cut me off, and he's like, "I don't care." But I want to kind of do a series where it's like speaking to a non-Titanic enthusiast. So saying to them like, "What do you know about the coal fire theory, or what do you know about the switch theory, or what do you know?" And like, because it'll just be random, it'll be like nonsense. But yeah. But
because we obviously come in with like an educated view because we've like spent years of our interest into like diving into different sort of parts of it and know a fair bit. I'd say
exactly
that'd be interesting. Yeah.
But this has been a brilliant convo, and I know Presley had to go off. But yeah, thank you all so much for coming on and contributing. It's been brilliant, and I hope you've all had fun and enjoyed it as well.
Great fun.
Definitely
Thank you.
Had fun, yeah.
Always look forward to this.
Yeah. My wife doesn't. I can't go in the living room for 3 hours now. I'm like, I'm sorry.
See, it's fine. My other half does a podcast, so I'm just like, well, you've got yours, I've got mine.
It is what it is. Yeah. But thank you all so much, and yeah, we'll speak again soon.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
Guys. Bye.
Bye.